The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 49. The Unknown Regions. The final domain of the cluster, the Unknown Regions, can barely be considered a part of the Stellar Archipelago at all. It is essentially an entirely separate group of islands that happens to share the same ocean, so remote that few within the Imperium or the Midrim have even heard of it. This is reflected by the fact that it appears, at first glance, to be the only region of the cluster that is beyond Sidious's reach. Here, the optimistically named New Republic swears that it has defeated the Imperium entirely. My initial suspicions were that they had escaped to a stretch of ocean beyond Imperial control, bested the handful of patrols that had come their way, and declared unconditional military victory. But the bizarre temporal nature of the archipelago may mean that something stranger is afoot. Regardless of how it happened, the government here is free of the Imperium. For now. However, there are rumors of the Imperium's return. The First Order, a paramilitary organization whose members are nostalgic for the taste of boot polish, are attempting to revive it. Excuse me, Master. I confess that I am having some difficulty giving an account of the First Order for you, for I do not know whether a candid description of it, or of anything else for that matter, will trigger your wrath. I told you the details that led to my conclusions about Maul's past, lest you accuse me of baseless speculation, and you chose to interpret them as a personal attack. This may shock you, but not everything I write is a bid for your attention, and I cannot properly survey the domains and individuals that you selected for me if describing their characteristics will send you into a fit of pique. Do you desire an accurate report, or a collection of pretty lies that will not prick the withered husk of your conscience? There was a time when a truthful accounting would not have aggrieved you so. Then you had a friend. You chose, instead, to have a servant. This, of course, is your prerogative, Master. But, as I am your servant, let me do my God's damned job. At any rate, I was speaking of the First Order. Whether its members are at loose ends without a boot on their throats, or whether they dream of wearing the boot themselves, they long to return to the days of the Imperium. They are, in truth, less than a shadow of the Empire. But danger can lurk in shadows. The Lord. The bombastically titled Supreme Leader of the First Order, Kylo Ren, styles himself as the son of Darth Vader. When telling me this, Aphra rolled her eyes with such gusto that she must have seen the inside of her skull. The distance from the hub of the Imperium to the Unknown Regions, she informed me, was nothing compared to the distance that the apple had fallen from the tree. Kylo Ren, the story goes, began life as a foundling on a backwater island, but his innate magical abilities were so powerful that he attracted the attention of a Jedi who had fled to the Unknown Regions to escape the Imperium. This Jedi had created a school to train magically gifted children in the hopes of reviving the dying order, and Kylo Ren outshone them all. Such brilliance, Ren believed, could not bloom in isolation. His unknown parents must have hailed from an exceptional arcane lineage. This was irrefutably confirmed by a vision informing him that he was the son of Darth Vader. After all, one can always trust in visions that appear to a single recipient and tell him precisely what he most longs to hear. Although this vision could be ascribed to wishful thinking, madness, or a nakedly self-aggrandizing lie, my personal experiences in the Unknown Regions make me suspect that he did, in fact, receive a vision from an outside source. But that source is far from trustworthy. Kylo Ren attempted to follow in his progenitor's footsteps by slaughtering any Jedi who crossed his path, including the massacre of his fellow students, and by giving himself the aforementioned dramatic title of Supreme Leader. He dresses in a ridiculous approximation of Vader's armor, and has forged his own red Sith blade. However, reports on his behavior suggest that he is an heir to Vader in the same way that a doltish prince might be the heir to a great king. Upon hearing these less-than-inspiring tales, I was somewhat dismayed to discover that Kylo Ren was, in fact, the buyer who had hired Aphra to bring the cauldron from Dathomir. I learned this when Aphra pulled aside the few of us who knew of her history with Vader and told us that we were not, under any circumstances, to tell Ren about it. She believed that if she were lucky, she would simply be forced to regale the starstruck Supreme Leader with tales of his father's greatness. If she were not, he would attempt to prove to her that he was a worthy heir to Vader's legacy. Having endured the real Vader, she had no interest in suffering through the hollow but dangerous caricature of one who hoped to imitate his cruelty. The land. The New Republic governs the unknown regions, if government is the correct term for their form of leadership. The Senate is terrified of producing another Palpatine, and to prevent this, they ensure that every possible action is wrapped in layers of bureaucracy. If dozens of politicians must approve every decision, no one of them can seize too much power. While a noble idea in theory, this inertia has allowed the First Order to flourish. The Senate is unable to come to a firm consensus as to whether the First Order is a true danger or simply a group of glorified mummers in Imperial uniforms, and without such a consensus, they're too timid to act. At the time I visited the unknown regions, the Senate was voting on whether or not to form an investigative committee, which would determine what sort of investigative committee could best research the First Order. I'm not jesting. Unsurprisingly, those who take the threat of the First Order seriously are not willing to wait while the New Republic votes on what color ink the committee should use for their reports. Therefore, there are some within the new regime who have begun to move against the First Order in secret, gathering information or making strikes without the formal approval of the Senate. The First Order, meanwhile, prefers using agents that cannot be traced back to them directly, as moving too blatantly would risk awakening the sleeping giant of the New Republic. This makes the unknown regions a haven for mercenaries and smugglers, a fact that had Aphra and her crew all but salivating as they described the situation to me. Even more exciting for Aphra herself was the wealth of magic items and other treasures within the unknown regions. These are, again, some of the most remote islands within all of the Stellar Archipelago, and are far from the reach of the Imperium. Items that would long ago have been fed to the Black Citadel and the Hub or the Outer Rim have remained undiscovered here, and there are ruins that predate the Republic itself. Apparently, bringing an item from another part of the archipelago to the unknown regions was a reversal of Aphra's usual line of business, although she did admit under some pressure that the division between the unknown regions and the other parts of the archipelago could be as illusory as the difference between the Midrim and the Hub. The islands sometimes had different names. The island that I had known as Tatooine was now inexplicably called Jakku, and Hosnian Prime was obviously Coruscant, but they were the same. It seemed that the unknown regions, too, were separated by time as well as space. This was suggested in ways other than the nature of the islands. While everyone in the unknown regions claimed that the Imperium had been conclusively defeated, many went so far as to aver that Palpatine was dead. Accounts of his death were muddled and contradictory, that a group of adventurers had stormed the Black Citadel and put him to the sword, that the Citadel had exploded and killed him in a rush of uncontrolled magical energy, even that Darth Vader himself had repented of his evil ways and slain his former liege. Nevertheless, the similarities to accounts of Dooku's death in every domain except the Midrim are too compelling to ignore. Similarly, assuming that Palpatine and Sidious are separate beings, which I find increasingly dubious, Sidious's own followers believe him to be destroyed as well. Several former Inquisitors, calling themselves the Knights of Ren, have banded together to find what power they can in the wake of his death, and there are rumors of Sith cultists attempting to summon him once more, an act that, of course, would be unnecessary if he were still present. On the other hand, well, I have not spoken of this yet, but when I have chosen to sleep in the Stellar Archipelago, my dreams have often had an oddly portentous feel. According to the Jedi I spoke to in the Midrim, this is fairly common for magic users. They hold that magic is a living force with a will of its own, sending signs and visions to those who wield it. I have no idea why the abstract concept of magic would want me to dream about a human-sized, 8-legged lizard with the power to make himself invisible, but I suppose ordinary, arbitrary dreams can sometimes feel portentous as well. One dream that was certainly worthy of note, however, came a few days before we were due to deliver the cauldron to Kylo Ren. I dreamt that I was in a cozy, book-lined study, seated across a desk from an avuncular old man with the second beakiest nose I had seen of late. He gave me a kindly smile as he stood.
"Hello, child. You're a long way from home."
I stood too, quickly enough to knock my chair to the floor. "I don't know who you are, and I don't care. Get the hell out of my head."
"Do forgive the intrusion. I fear this is the only opportunity I have to speak with you, for I'm a very busy man. My name is Palpatine."
Dread possibilities. I eyed Palpatine as warily as I would have if I had learned that I were locked in this study with a tiger. I'd heard you were dead.
Time is strange in these lands, and it seems to me you know that life and death are not absolutes.
Did that mean that he sensed the necrotic energy suffusing me? Was he implying that he was undead? But if he and Sidious were one and the same, how could a fiend become undead? Maybe Sidious was alive and well and puppeting Palpatine's corpse, but that didn't square with the Knights of Ren and their belief that the Archdevil was gone. I shook my head, but I couldn't afford to get distracted right now. I would dearly love to press you for details, but something tells me you aren't here to give me an interview. He chuckled warmly.
"No, I'm here to make you an offer, then I'll leave you to your sleep."
Oh, gods, another one. I let out a resigned sigh and spread my hands, inviting him to continue. Palpatine gestured, and the cauldron we had acquired on Dathomir materialized on his desk. The green ichor that filled it was gone, revealing an interior engraved with glyphs.
"You are delivering this artifact to Kylo Ren. Ren is in need of guidance. He is a man of great potential, and I want to help him achieve that potential. If you were to make certain alterations in the glyphs on the interior of the cauldron..."
A handful of the glyphs glowed red, the lines shifting subtly.
"It would be easier for me to communicate with him, even in this realm."
He was coming into my dreams and trying to manipulate someone by carving glyphs. My hand crept unconsciously to my bodice. He had really chosen the wrong cat's paw for this. I thought of using Eldritch Sight to determine the purpose of the sigils, but discarded the idea immediately. Palpatine was controlling this dream and would show me whatever he wanted me to see. I would have to research this when I awoke. There are hundreds of people in the First Order who are far more inclined to do the bidding of a despot than I am. Why are you coming to me? He gave me a hurt look.
"Despot? I love democracy. But surely you know that Ren needs counsel if he is to avoid becoming a despot himself. You have access to the cauldron before he acquires it. I prefer that he not discover these alterations. He has all the headstrong rebelliousness of youth and might believe himself above the words of an old man. Furthermore, you are a stranger to these lands, and I do not believe you are planning to stay. Help me with this small thing, and I'll personally guarantee your safe passage home."
I've seen the fruits of far too many of your personal guarantees to agree to that. Thank you.
"Oh dear. Well, if you don't help me, I can't guarantee you'll ever get home again."
How do you intend to prevent me from getting home? You can't even find someone to do this task for you other than a woman who has no loyalty to you and no reason to trust you. I frowned. I had meant the question almost rhetorically, but now I was genuinely turning it over. In any other region of the Stellar Archipelago, Palpatine or Sidious or both or whoever this was, he would never have had to stoop so low as to ask me for help. My mind went back to what my My mind went back to what I had been told after viewing the Black Citadel, that I had a particular sensitivity to magic. Was he approaching one of the only people in the unknown regions who could perceive him? You don't have any power here at all, do you? I didn't realize I had spoken the words aloud until Palpatine's face darkened. No, it wasn't just his face. The whole room had become darker, colder.
You impudent child,
he snarled. How had I thought his face kindly? It was the grayish white of a corpse, as shriveled as a piece of dried fruit, and his nobleman's clothing had been replaced by a black robe.
Do as I say, or my agents in the First Order will show you exactly how powerless I am. They will bring you to me, and I will entomb you in the Citadel myself. You can serve me in this, or you can serve me as fuel.
You may castigate me for hurling witless insults if you like, Master. But it is an easy thing to make critiques from the safety of one's castle. I knew that if I showed fear or weakness to this thing, he would seize upon it and I would be lost. I forced a scornful laugh. If you knew whom I've been serving for the past 4 years, you would know why I'm not afraid of you.
You will be.
Lightning arced from his hands. I woke up screaming, surrounded by the smell of my own cooking flesh. It wasn't as bad as I feared, but my skin was burned, and wisps of smoke rose from my nightclothes. I eschewed sleep from that point on. The cauldron had an aura of necromancy, after sketching the glyphs Palpatine had shown me and using Eldritch Sight upon them, which I did at a port where we stopped for supplies, not on the Archangel itself, and I burned the parchment immediately afterwards. I'm not an idiot, thank you. I determined that they would change the magic from necromancy to illusion. It was difficult to see how this change would be advantageous if the cauldron were similar to Iran's, with its necromantic powers creating an army of undead. If, on the other hand, it were intended to allow Kylo Ren to communicate with the dead, say, with his dead father, it was easy to imagine why Palpatine would prefer a version of Vader that was entirely his creation, telling Ren whatever he wanted the fool to hear. I had no intention of doing Sidious's will, but the idea of Kylo Ren speaking to the real Vader was hardly an appealing one either. I felt a small stab of guilt at what I did next, but it would have been a larger one if I had thought for a moment that Aphra and her crew weren't planning to steal my magic items and turn them in for the bounty when this job was done. Or that they wouldn't turn me in just as readily if they learned I had magic of my own. I cast Hypnotic Pattern on the bugbear who was guarding the cauldron, threw the cauldron into the ocean, and bought passage under an assumed name on a ship leaving the port. I did leave a purse on the table where the cauldron had been, but the sum wasn't close to the exorbitant one that Aphra had initially quoted me for passage. No matter. Let Aphra find some other source of income. Let Kylo Ren find some other magic item to fill the gaping hole in his spoiled, stupid heart. Let Sidious find another tool. I am a pawn on one board already. I will not be played on any others. Parting thoughts. The borders of the unknown regions remained closed for several days after I abandoned the Archangel. I remained on the ship that I had boarded for some time, staying in a cabin that was far too small for the price I paid, and trying to watch the onboard entertainment around a giant pillar. However, the First Order never came upon us, and eventually the borders opened to let us pass. This was further evidence. Palpatine, or Sidious, may have been able to tell Kylo Ren to close the borders, but with only a single group of armed extremists on his side, he had neither the magic nor the manpower to find me, and eventually was forced to give up. I cannot begin to speculate as to whether Palpatine or Sidious are alive or dead, nor how a fiend might become undead. I have presented what information I have gathered about the erstwhile Emperor, and I leave the interpretation of it to one with a much larger library. It is disheartening, however, to imagine that someone might finally have rid the world of Palpatine only for him, somehow, to return. When I first arrived at the unknown regions, I had such a strong sense of hope. Seeing that there was a safe haven for those who had been harmed by the Imperium, that the Emperor was dead, that the Republic had a chance to live up to its ideals, it gave me hope that darkness could be defeated, that the heart may be weak, and sometimes it may even give in, but that deep down, there's a light that never goes out. But now, I fear that this was nothing but naivete on my part. More and more, it seems that every light must fade, and every heart return to darkness. Regards, D.
You go through exhaustive lengths to ensure you need not refer to my person, in an obvious attempt to avoid addressing me as master. As amusing as this petty and meaningless act of defiance is, I grow tired of your indignant reactions and persistent lies, as if not even a speck of blood has ever tainted your hands. You expect me to believe that you cannot show the same amount of care in the rest of your correspondence. Then you are incapable of writing in a less aggressive manner. And I once thought of you as sagacious. When I offered this pack to you, little servant, you possessed multiple qualities I considered ideal for this project, one of which was your empathetic nature, and another your ability to form connections with others, despite perceived differences. You are sorely lacking in these traits as of late, and your wrathful tendencies will lead you down a path from which you cannot turn back. On the topic of those with wrathful tendencies, Kylo Ren is an entirely pathetic creature, as is to be expected from someone who grants themselves the title of Supreme Leader. Beggar may name himself a king, but that does not change the truth of what they are. Kylo Ren will always be nothing. Sidious must be as impotent as you deemed him. He does not often leave insults unanswered, and his answer, more often than not, is a painful death. If he manages to establish a connection with Kylo Ren, I suspect Sidious will make short work of the little delusional idiot, and the New Republic will fall. The New Republic's lack of any true governance is a prime example of why a strong hand is a requirement for those who hold positions of authority. A confident and powerful leader can strike down a threat before it fully forms. A weak leader merely watches as the strength of their enemies grows and will, in the end, ultimately fail their people when it matters most.
Maul. Sidious tried to enlist me in one of his schemes. I sabotaged it instead. I didn't send your love, but I thought about it.
Well done. Be wary. Sidious has plans within plans. Let me know when you are safely out of the archipelago.
This has been The Wonderful World of Dark Lords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode were obtained through museopen.org. The Requiem Aeternum and Agnus Dei from Felix Draesica's Requiem Mass are used under a Creative Commons Attribution license. All other recordings are in the public domain. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at Darklord Aslan. The Wonderful World of Dark Lords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening.